Today's plan is a very simple one, folks. Complete the Pentagon challenge, the hardest challenge Football Manager has to offer. We've already lifted the Continental Club trophies in Africa, Asia, North America and South America, which leaves us with just one continent left to conquer, Europe, and the UEFA Champions League. Without doubt, this will be the hardest one of the 5 to win, but it's also the one I've got plenty of experience winning before, with just about every series I've done on YouTube in the last 9 years ending with a Champions League win. Spoilers. But armed with my 5-star reputation and track record of being one of the greatest managers in the history of the game, it's time to head back to my home continent a hero and pick up one more piece of silverware. So now we know what continent we're aiming for. The challenge now is choosing the right club. I'm not even going to consider clubs not already playing in the Champions League. I've got enough of a reputation to wait for a real elite level job to become available. But of course, the downside to that is that those kind of jobs don't come up very often. And looking at the available jobs, the only one that's currently playing in the Champions League is Bayer Leverkusen, who are currently in 8th place in Bundesliga. They did finish 2nd last season, but were 17 points behind champions Bayern Munich, and not exactly a team I'd expect to win the Champions League with within 2 or 3 years. But with nothing else available, I stick in an application, but kind of half-heartedly, hoping something else will magically come up before they offer me the job, ideally in the Premier League or La Liga, as they're the leagues that have dominated the Champions League winners list over the course of the save. Leverkusen presumably knew something I didn't know, because they took their time to offer me the job, but nothing better had come along by the time they did. I toyed with the idea of staying in Brazil with Grêmio for a bit longer and waiting for a big job, but figured I could be wasting a full season by doing that, because the likes of Real Madrid, Barcelona, Man City, etc. only really change managers in the summer when their current guys either retire or take international jobs. So I may as well have half a season in Germany, and who knows, I might fall in love with the place and decide to get stuck into a project. And to be fair, they've given me the kind of money that could lead a man to falling in love. I've got over £70 million to spend in the upcoming transfer window, and a not awful squad. Usually at this stage in FM, you walk into a club like this and they're all way over 30 and you have to do a full rebuild. But this team is relatively balanced age-wise, although with our 2 best players both being attacking midfielders, we might finally have to abandon the 4-2-4 system we've been using since Milford in South Africa. And talking of things that have followed me from club to club, it's time you all met my little buddy Wonka Loon, who I first hired as a performance analyst back at Shimizu. He's not very good at his job, but goodness me, does he love me. So when I left to go to America, he quit on the spot and then applied to be a recruitment analyst at Sporting Kansas City, quit again when I left there, became a performance analyst again at Grêmio before applying for a transfer to the recruitment department when I advertised for an analyst there, and he walked out again when I quit to come back to Europe. There wasn't much in the way of staff when I got to Germany, but guess whose name was on the list of applicants for a performance analyst job at Leverkusen? My old pal Wonka. Wonka Loon, ladies and gentlemen, arguably the greatest hero of the entire save. We only actually played one game before the winter break, beating Cologne 2-1 thanks to a couple of goals from a 20-year-old homegrown striker, Emmanuel Hager. We're developing a bit of a knack for finding underutilised youth players at every club we manage. With the transfer window now open, a few of my older players want out for one last payday, which is fine by me, so we've accepted a couple of offers for Edmund Tapsoba, and we'll try and get an actual transfer fee for Jeremy Frimpong, who's out of contract in the summer and has no plans to re-sign. I headed back to Brazil for my first signing, bringing 21-year-old winger Diego in for £15 million from Corinthians, and Tapsoba went to Chelsea for £10 million. On the pitch, I decided to stick with a 4-2-4 after all, so Luka Vabancic has got on the transfer list, partly because I remember him being a bit of a flop in that Birmingham rebuild I did a few weeks ago, so can't really trust him, can I? We secured our qualification for the Champions League knockout stages with a 2-1 win over Sevilla and a 6-1 thrashing of Charleroi, but it wasn't enough to get us into the top 8 and skip around because of results earlier in the season. Domestically, we look pretty good when we're not playing Dortmund or Bayern, so I guess we're the 3rd best team in Germany, which suggests we're unlikely to win the Champions League this year unless we do something pretty special in the final week of the transfer window. If someone could wake up my scouts, that'd be super. We managed to get £21 million from Arsenal for a 32-year-old Frimpong who only had 4 months left on his contract, so I'd call that some pretty good business, but nobody wanted Vabancic, so we're stuck with him for the rest of the season. We did bring in a couple of promising youngsters on deadline day, but seem stuck in that FM no man's land you sometimes find yourself in when you're at an almost top level club where the players that will actually improve you either don't want to sign for you or cost way too much money. So you kind of can't buy them and you have to rely on youngsters that you then build up over a number of years. And it takes a while. I don't really want to take a while. We want to win the Champions League like this year, next year. Get this wrapped up. We drew Rennes in the knockout playoff, currently third in the French league. We went 1-0 down in a very tight first leg away from home just before half time and would have been happy bringing them back to our place with just one goal to overturn. But then we gifted them a 94th minute second and the second leg started to look like a massive uphill battle. The second leg was just as close as the first and it's pretty clear these are two pretty evenly matched teams, which is fairly alarming in the context of trying to win the Champions League. We're only as good as Rennes. We took the lead on 56 minutes, leaving it 2-1 to Rennes on aggregate. A goal finally came in the 91st minute, but it was for Rennes. So when we finally got our second in the 93rd minute, it didn't matter. We'd won on the night, but lost on aggregate, and we're a long, long way away from being a team that can win this tournament. So despite only having been here a few months, I'm now officially job hunting again. I'll obviously try and get Leverkusen into the top 4 so we can have another go next season, and I won't leave in a sideways move, but we're very much on the lookout now for an elite level club we can jump ship to so we can fast forward this process and not have to spend 3 or 4 seasons building this team up to where it needs to be. We won the majority of our league games for the rest of the season, qualifying for the Champions League again with a couple of games to spare. We ended up finishing 3rd in the league, and then 2 very interesting things happened. First, Pep Guardiola was sacked at Manchester City after 17 seasons in charge, and then we found out we'd somehow qualified for the new format of the Club World Cup, presumably off the back of our league finish as Germany were the host nation for it. I have no idea how it works. I don't see how we could have qualified through the Champions League or anything like that, so it must just be because it's in Germany. But this is a Club World Cup that of course includes all of the teams I've previously won Champions League with, even Cape Town Spurs. We've ended up being drawn in the same group as Shimizu, so I get to play against the team I spent the most time at for the first time ever. Sporting Kansas City and Gremio are here as well, and we've also been drawn in the same group as Manchester City, who I have just put in a job application for. I've never won this stupid tournament before, but if any team that I've ever had any association with win it this time around, I'm claiming it. Maybe I'll win it with Manchester City. Wouldn't that be a thing? Or maybe I won't, because by the time they even offer me an interview, we've beaten them 2-0 and also beaten my old club Shimizu to put ourselves top of the group. And it was genuinely wonderful to see my old buddy Shuto Machino again. We had a lovely old catch-up. Shimizu then went on to beat City 1-0 in the final group match, securing 2nd place behind us in the group and knocking Manchester City out. They also finished 6th in the Premier League last year, which through sheer fluke, i.e. Liverpool winning the Champions League, they have managed to sneak into the Champions League again for next year. But if both my Leverkusen and Shimizu teams are better than them, is it really worth going to Manchester City? We knocked Chelsea out on penalties in the 2nd round before City answered my question for me, offering me the job along with the best youth system in the world and a staggering £8 million a week wage budget. It's an ageing squad that will need a freshen up to challenge properly, but with that kind of money, I can't say no. So I wish Leverkusen luck for the quarter-final against Milan and jump on the first plane to Manchester for my 7th and surely final club of the challenge. Wong Kar-loon carried my bags for me like the loyal servant he is, and without their inspirational leaders, Leverkusen lost to Milan and the Club World Cup remains the one I just can't win. So, Manchester City, they've got a few quid and have managed it terribly. They've got a player on over £500,000 a week, who to be fair, he's very good, but I think I really do have to abandon the 4-2-4 this time to accommodate him. Gvardiol, Haaland and Foden are still about, albeit very old, and Gary Astles isn't the only top-level player the best youth setup in the world has churned out while I've been away from England, although some of them, like Kean Knight, are very overpaid and are going to be hard to get rid of as a result. So despite the attraction of that £8 million a week wage budget, we're maxed out on it, so we're going to have to clear out some deadwood before we can start spending, and we're going to need to spend. This team is lucky to be in the Champions League next season. 6th place would usually not be enough. By the time the first game of the season came around, we'd managed to shift nearly £100 million of that deadwood, and although we hadn't actually signed a player yet, we had brought in 29 staff members to sort out the club off the pitch. Sadly, Wong Kar-loon wasn't one of those 29. He actually turned down a job as a performance analyst for the under-21s. He's just not good enough. He's not Man City first team level. I'm sorry, Wong. But he's fallen on his feet and is the new head performance analyst at PSV Eindhoven. Good luck, Wong. You will not be forgotten. We settled on a 4-2-3-1 formation to get highest player Astles in his best position, and with Haaland, Foden and Nico Williams joining him in the front four, we should score a few goals. We lost 2 of our first 3 games and none of those attackers scored a goal in any of them. And we also found it really hard to force the highly paid fringe players out of the club, so this hasn't been the one window rebuild I was hoping for, and our only signings ended up being a 32-year-old Rodrigo on a season-long loan from Real Madrid and another 32-year-old Mickey van der Ven for £18 million from Newcastle for some defensive cover. This is possibly going to be harder than I thought. We did slowly find our groove though, the main catalyst being a 3-1 away win against Man United in the Champions League, which was the first time the front four really clicked, with Haaland and Foden in particular running the show. By the halfway point of the season, we were 3rd in the Premier League, but well behind Liverpool and Chelsea and probably not in the title race. Luckily, the board are happy with a top 4 finish this season, and we should be good enough for that. We're also cruising along nicely in the Champions League, looking good for a top 8 finish despite a defeat against Borussia Dortmund, and by the time the transfer window opened again, I had nearly £200 million burning a hole in my pocket and an urge to start spending some of it. First, we sold a couple of key players who didn't really fit into my long-term plans, both to our big title rivals, to strengthen them. 33-year-old Phil Foden went to Liverpool for £46 million and 31-year-old Amar Dedic went to Chelsea for £32 million. I broke our club transfer record to replace Dedic at left back, spending £101 million on Francisco Javier Fidalgo from Valencia, and then added 18-year-old Croatian wonderkid centre-back Andy Kersner for £14 million, fully intending to have him as my starting centre-back immediately, despite his young age. Goalkeeper Ziad Ramadan joined us from Aston Villa for £90 million, which allowed Otavio to go back to Brazil, and then we added young Belgian winger Gregory Senchel for £35 million and 19-year-old fullback Iram Caballero for £31 million to finally inject some youth in the squad. That's £290 million spent, £216 million sold, so not a bad net spend for the first season, and by the end of the January window, we were closing the gap on Liverpool and Chelsea in the league, and we'd finished 4th in the Champions League, giving us a bye through to the round of 16, where we were drawn against 18 times winners Real Madrid, which is not ideal. The away leg started perfectly with Gary Astles now nailed on as a starting attacking midfielder for us with Foden out of the way, scoring after just 1 minute, but some guy called Bellingham equalised on 15 minutes. Erling Haaland put us ahead again just before half-time, before Bellingham equalised again on 64 minutes. Bellingham then turned provider on 81 minutes, setting up Madrid's 3rd, before Ramadan had me questioning his £90 million fee 2 minutes later, letting Madrid go 4-2 up and giving us a lot to do in the second leg. And it was just about all over after 12 minutes when Madrid went 5-2 up on aggregate from a Wirtz penalty. Erling Haaland tried to do it all on his own with 2 second-half goals, but then club captain Rico Lewis earned a spot on my enemies list with 2 pointless yellow cards, effectively handing the tie to Madrid just as we were getting back into it. We're not a million miles away from where we need to be to win this, and we obviously won't face Real Madrid in the round of 16 every year, but the dream is over for this season. And it pretty much knocked the stuffing out of us for the season domestically too, as we immediately lost to Chelsea in the league and got knocked out of the FA Cup by Liverpool. March 2034 wasn't my favourite month of this save, but at least we secured Champions League football again for next season with a couple of matches to spare, and I now had a really clear idea of what I needed to do to this team, and it wasn't going to be pretty. The board only gave me £60 million to spend, but we had loads of spare wage budget and it was time to get rid of the old men. All the old men. And the first 2 out the door were nailed on starters from last year. Nico Williams going to Al Ahly for £51 million and Erling Haaland to Real Madrid for £49.5 million. To start rebuilding the attack, we brought in Rodrigo Mora from Porto for £42 million, but with over £100 million left to spend, we were far from done. We sold almost £300 million worth of established players that summer, with other notable sales including Van der Ven, who'd lasted just the 1 season with us, Gvardiol, who joined Haaland at Real Madrid, and Rico Lewis, who was sent to Chelsea as punishment for what he did to us last season. Lots of big fees and even bigger salaries off the wage bill set us up to go out and spend £400 million on a proper Kev team. Luis Guillem joined from Palmeiras for £18.75 million, and we got another wonderkid centre-back to partner Kersner at the back, 18-year-old American Kurt Clark. Oscar Gluck, who'd scored a decisive goal for Real Madrid against us last season, arrived for £55 million, and we bought a couple of Chelsea's old men on the cheap to thank them for the £100 million they'd given us for Dedic and Lewis, bringing in a 31-year-old Marcus Leonardo as a backup striker and a 32-year-old, but still very good, Moises Caicedo to run our midfield. We then went full Man City, bringing in a Brazilian wonder kid on the cheap from one of our City Group partner clubs, and then raided Real Madrid again for Luca Guilarducci and went back to Germany to sign Brazilian international right-back Maicon from Leipzig. Welsh centre-back Daryl Harris came in from Atalanta to complete an entirely new look defence, and with the emergence of young England homegrown striker Salomão Machado as Haaland's natural replacement, the only player still in my best 11 who was a starter when I arrived a year ago is Gary Astles and his £500,000 a week wages. Rebuild complete, and the media consider us joint favourites for the league with Liverpool, and we've gone from our defence being our biggest weakness to having two defenders in the media Dream 11 and the two best wonder kid defenders in the world starting alongside them for us. And we opened our campaign in style with a 3-0 win over Premier League rivals Chelsea. They were so much better than us a year ago, but in this game we just utterly ripped them apart. We followed that up with a 5-0 win over Monaco, a 2-0 win over Anderlecht, and a 5-1 win over Rennes before we came up against the team that knocked us out last year, Real Madrid, now with an extra Erling Haaland, who, following his move to Spain, now lives in Andy Kersner's pocket. 0-0 will do just fine. We kept Haaland and Bellingham quiet. We are learning. We rotated a little bit for Nice away and lost 1-0, so we've also learned not to do that again. But by the halfway point of the season, we'd already qualified for the knockouts and we're also 7 points clear at the top of the Premier League, with Machado well clear at the top of the goal-scoring charts and City fans already forgetting that Erling Haaland ever existed. With all our business done in the summer, January was a quiet one, with us just adding another wonder kid centre-back, this time 19-year-old Serbian international Zoran Babic from Partizan for 4.6 million, mainly because he's 6'6" and you can't teach that. We won every game in all competitions in January, ultimately finishing second in the Champions League and earning that bye to the round of 16 again, where we drew my former club Bayer Leverkusen, a team I'm sure a few folks in the comments section are still pretty upset I left. They finished second last season under my replacement, Gennaro Gattuso. He was sacked after a poor start to this season and was replaced by Vincent Kompany, who currently has the team sitting in 4th place in Bundesliga. So they've not massively progressed in the 18 months since I walked out on them. And I completely justified my decision to leave with a very comfortable 7-1 aggregate victory, setting us up for a quarter-final tie against Manchester United, who'd also emerged as our closest rivals for the Premier League title as well, under new manager Luis Enrique. We were unlucky to draw 0-0 at home in the first leg in a game we dominated, and I started to question the wisdom of selling Haaland, as we don't really have a viable backup to Machado. If he doesn't play well, we struggled to score. Dylan Harris scored after just 1 minute in the second leg at Old Trafford though, and we doubled our lead on the hour through a Levi Colwill own goal. Rasmus Højlund got a goal back just before half time, but that was it. We basically cancelled each other out in the second half and we booked our spot in the semi-final against Barcelona. And before we played that tie, we also celebrated winning the Premier League for the first time in 4 years, with us 10 points clear of United with 3 games to go. Manchester City are back. We were away at Camp Nou for the first leg of the semi-final and took the lead on 32 minutes through Senechal after some great work from Machado before we were gifted a second a few minutes later. Barcelona got a goal back just before the hour mark but couldn't find a way through our outstanding defence for a second goal, allowing us to bring a 1-goal lead back to England, where we absolutely thrashed them. What a contrast to the Real Madrid tie from last year this was. Barcelona didn't get a shot on target in the entire match, and we rattled 4 goals past them for a comfortable win and a spot in the Champions League final. We are only 1 game away from completing the Pentagon, and all that stood in our way was Phil Foden's Liverpool, who we faced in both the FA Cup and Champions League finals. First up was the FA Cup, and Foden didn't even make the Liverpool squad. He's only started 18 games for them this season. Turns out we sold him at exactly the right time because his replacement Astles has gone from strength to strength, and it was his through ball that set Machado up for the only goal goal of the game and we'd won the double. Could we do it again a week later? Still no sign of Phil Foden in the Liverpool squad, but I do want to give a special shout out to 20-year-old Argentinian left-back Guido Megna, who after getting sent off in the FA Cup final last week, got sent off again in the Champions League final. What a hero. We opened the scoring shortly after through Archie Gray, and a 10-man Liverpool side just couldn't get into the match. In a similar story to Barcelona in the previous round, they were completely shut out by our outstanding back four, and they didn't get a shot on target in the entire match. We added 2 late goals, but just didn't need them. We've built the best defence in world football. We use it to win the treble. We used it to win the Champions League and to complete the Pentagon in just 15 seasons. Who needs a goal scorer? Who needs Erling Haaland? And also, who guessed 14 seasons way back at the start? If you did, give yourself a pat on the back. I'm certainly giving myself a pat on the back for doing it. I've been playing Football Manager for over 30 years now. I've never tried this challenge before, and I have loved every minute of it. Hopefully you've enjoyed it as well. If you have, leave a thumbs up. Let me know down in the comments what challenge you'd like to see me do next. And of course, thank you very much for watching.